Hi everyone, this is Miss Weidenhammer, and today we are going to be taking a look at Lesson 10, Control of the Heart. So we'll be looking at how electrical signals are sent throughout the heart, throughout the chambers of the heart, and how those electrical signals allow the atria and the ventricles to contract, pushing blood throughout the heart and out of it, either to the lungs or to the rest of the body. So what I'm going to ask you to do is take your notes packet out. We're going to go through the slides that you need for Lesson 10 today. And when we're done going through all the slides, I'm going to ask you to come back to the note slides and watch these two videos. They do a really good job at doing an overview explanation of the electrical signals within the heart and how they allow those ventricles and atria to contract. So let's jump right on into it. Control of the heart. Our first bullet, beating of the heart is due to myogenic muscle contractions. What exactly do myogenic muscle contractions mean? Let's see. This means that the myocyte, or this myogenic muscle cell tissues, itself is the origin of contraction, and it's not controlled externally. So we can say that the origin of this electrical signal to allow for the contraction is happening right in the heart. So the nerve impulses from your nervous system or other parts of the body aren't playing a role here. It's originating, it's starting right in the heart. A region of myocytes called the sinoatrial node, also known as the pacemaker, are going to control the rate of the heartbeat. So looking at our image here, our right atrium is going to have the SA node, and that SA node is going to allow electrical signals to flow through the two atrium and allow both of them to contract. So again, SA node is up here. It's going to send these signals, these yellow arrows, and going to allow the atria to contract. So a wave of excitation is sent from the sinoatrial node, so that SA node up here that we just talked about, the pacemaker, causing the atria to contract. This excitation is conducted to the atrioventricular node. Now, the atrioventricular node, looking at the image, is going to be this yellow circle here. This AV node is going to get the signal from the SA node that got sent out to the atria. So let's keep reading. Now that we have our atrioventricular node, that is going to allow electrical signals to pass through nerves to the muscles of the ventricles, causing them to contract. So you can see here, our AV node is going to come down through the septum. So you can see these two bundles here coming down through, and then coming up and around the ventricles. These nerves coming up and around the ventricles are going to allow the contraction of the ventricles, causing them to push the blood out of the heart. And our last bullet, myogenic initiation of the contraction, means that the heart does not stop beating. It is not a conscious process. So you don't have to think about the beating of your heart. It's going to do it automatically. You don't have to tell it to do anything. It's going to do it by itself. And also the heart muscle and tissue does not fatigue. So sometimes if you go for a run and the next day your leg muscles hurt really bad because you've just used them up and you haven't used them in a while, they hurt, but your heart muscle is not going to become fatigued. There's a lot of mitochondria, a lot of ATP being produced in the heart tissue, and therefore you don't have to worry about thinking about getting your heart beating. It's an unconscious process. You don't have to think about it. So let's do a little overview of how the electrical signal is being passed through the heart. Again, we start off with the sinoatrial node, the SA node, also known as our pacemaker, which is kind of at the top of the heart to the right of it, right on top of the right atrium. Here, the electrical signal is going to be sent into the two atria. So our left and our right atria are now going to be contracting, but that signal is also going to be passed to the atrioventricular node, right here, this red. And that AV node is going to take the electrical signal and allow it to come through the bundle of His, so allow it to come through these two nerves, and up and around both of the ventricles. You can see here both of these red lines, and both of those red lines are going to be called your Purkinje fibers. They're going to be allowing your ventricles to contract when they need to, allowing that blood to be pushed out of the heart, either again to the lungs to get oxygen or out of the heart to the rest of the body. So some of you might have heard before about EKGs or ECGs and echocardiogram. So next up, we'll be taking a look at what exactly an EKG is. An echocardiogram, if you look at the bottom picture here, this is a regular echocardiogram and what you would see in a regular heartbeat based off of the electrical signals being sent throughout the heart. So in this slide, we're going to be taking a look at what exactly is happening in each of these sections of an EKG. But before we get into what exactly is happening, I first want to just go over the different parts of this line that we see down here. So we first have our P wave, that's the start of the EKG. We then have our QRS interval, so it has 3 different points to it. And then we have our T wave right here, which is going to indicate something else. So let's jump right in. Our first thing that's going to happen, we're first going to take a look at the first part of the P wave. And number 1 says the pacemaker generates wave of signals to contract. So again, our SA node or our pacemaker is at the top of the right atria. It's going to send the signals through the atria, both right and the left. And that's going to be described by that first part of the P wave. So I want you to label that first part just like they labeled it in yellow at the bigger picture. Label it number 1. That's the first thing that's happening. Number 2, the signal is delayed at the AV node. So we now know that the SA node sent the signals. You can see it in yellow. It sent the signals to the 2 atria. The next spot that electrical signal is going to go is the AV node. And it's going to pause there for a second before it gets into the rest of the heart. So here it is labeled in the EKG, the second part of the P wave. So what I want you to do is put a number 2 right at this part of the P wave that's coming down. Number 3, we have signals passed to the heart apex. And the heart apex is where this yellow shadow is. It's the very bottom of the heart. So our electrical signal has now gone from the AV node down through the bundle branches and to the end of the heart. And that is going to be shown where this little yellow piece is. So that's going to be down here, number 3. So I want you to label that number 3 is where we are going, finishing the P wave and about to start the QRS. So that's our number 3. And then moving on to number 4, the signal spreads throughout the ventricle. So now you can see here the signal was at the apex. It's now going to come up through the Purkinje fibers on both of the ventricles and allow those ventricles to contract, allowing the blood to flow out to the body or to the lungs to get oxygen. And that's going to be described by the QRS. Okay, so I want you to label the QRS here, number 4. So the QRS goes together. That's one section of it, the QRS number 4. So we don't have a T wave labeled here in this bigger picture, but I want you to think about it. So if we have just signaled the Purkinje fibers to contract the ventricles, what do you think is going to happen next? The ventricles have contracted. Now what's going to happen to the ventricles? Hopefully you've answered at home. Yes, our ventricles are now going to relax. They've done their duty. They've done their job. They've sent the blood out of the heart because they've contracted. So our T wave is going to show the electrical signal of the ventricles relaxing. So if you take a look down here at the speaker notes, the T wave is going to show us repolarization of the ventricles. Or you could also describe it as relaxation of cardiac muscles of the ventricles. So our T wave is just showing that now, okay, we're done with the contracting of the atria and the ventricles. We're now going to go back into relaxation mode and then start up again with our P wave. So I know in your notes that's not added in there, but I want you to add a little number 5 to show that T is our ventricles now relaxing. So that's our EKG. Moving on